I've got the real reason that he retired. An hour before his retirement announcement, Dylan on Dodger Debate said he should pitch out of the bullpen. He said he'd rather quit, and that's it. Then he retired.
You know, Plash, back in our day, you kept two veteran columnists waiting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Dodger Debate. I'm Jack Harris.
Oh, nice of you to join us, Jack.
Sorry, Jack. I mean to interrupt your day.
I'm sorry that my laptop refuses to cooperate sometimes.
Plash, does this remind you when you used to keep Jim Murray waiting?
Never did.
Nope.
Well, I really think the lesson from this is that I need to live my life more like a certain left-handed pitcher. Right down to the minute, routine oriented, knows exactly how to hit every mark of his day to get the work that he does done, and did it for 18 years.
I've got the real reason that he retired. An hour before his retirement announcement, Dylan on Dodger Debate said he should pitch out of the bullpen. He said he'd rather quit, and that's it. Then he retired.
Better way to close my career than to close out the World Series. What an inspired idea.
He can't pitch out of the bullpen. He cannot pitch out of the bullpen now, especially now he can't.
Dude,
He
doesn't have a
read a letter
choice.
from his wife. He cried. We're not going to put him out there in a bullpen and let him get shelled.
What are the chances that the Dodgers have a 5-run lead trying to close out a World Series, and it just the poetic ending that it could be?
No. If you want to start him in the NLCS with 7 games and need his arm, that's fine. Start him. Do not pitch him out of the bullpen. Don't do that to him. Don't ruin his legacy. Because again, he was crying for God's sakes, and he's going to put him out in the mound and let him get shelled.
You said he was, at the beginning of this season, you said he was finished. I told you he wasn't. I was right. And I'm telling you right now, he can close.
We really do have impeccable timing, because that video yesterday could have driven the entire Clayton Kershaw news cycle
Yes, it did.
on its
I think
own.
it did.
And instead, something much more notable happened. Obviously, you guys have been here to watch his whole career, from 7th overall draft pick to a really hyped top prospect when he was called up, to somebody who had to kind of find his footing early in his big league career, to becoming, what multiple people described him as yesterday, the pitcher of his generation, going on one of the most dominant runs, ever in MLB history. When you look at that 2011 to 2014 stretch, when he led the majors in ERA 4 times and won 3 Cy Youngs and won the MVP award in 2014. Obviously, we were expecting that this could be and was sort of shaping up to be his final year. But what was your reaction to the news yesterday? And where does your mind go when you look back at Clayton Kershaw's career and the parts of it that you guys have gotten to see up close?
Well, I wasn't surprised. I don't think anybody was surprised. I think his career has been defined as much by failure as it has been by success. I give him full credit. Dylan and I talked about this on the show. We ripped him. We tore him apart. The town tore him apart against the Cardinals, against the Nationals, against the Astros. We for postseason failures. At one point, he was on the mound when the Dodgers were knocked out of the postseason for like 4 straight years. He was terrible, but he hung in and he kept pitching. He kept coming back every year. He kept coming back. He made no excuses. Never blamed a bum arm or a bad bullpen or a overworked. He never blamed anybody. He took it on the chin. He hung in there, and then he got his world championship in 2020. He pitched great against in the World Series run. So I think of him as being resilient. I think we could not write his story without talking about how bad he was and how good he became.
Yeah, kind of going back to the very beginning, right? That was my first spring training covering the team. I started covering the team in the middle of 07, so my first spring training was in 08, was his first year in camp. And to be honest, man, I watch guys throw bullpens. I can't tell. It all looks fast to me, right? Like
You don't.
85,
You couldn't.
85
You
looks like
you
fire.
couldn't tell on the Public Enemy #1 pitch.
But who could tell was Ken Gurnick. who used to work at the Herald Examiner and later the National, and and at this point he was at MLB.com. And I just remember after Kershaw's like first bullpen, Gurnick was like, "Whoa," And then afterwards we talked to Joe Torre, who just kind of let it slip. I mean, you got to keep in mind, right? This guy hasn't even pitched yet, and somebody asked about, well, is this guy ready to, you get a look at him up here, and Torre says, well, right now the Arsenal's kind of limited. He only has two pitches. But then again, Sandy Koufax only had two pitches too. And I mean,
Really?
that was kind of the introduction, right? I mean, that's where the bar got set. Very early in his career, right, our late colleague TJ Simers was having this fundraising event. Torrey and Koufax, right? They had this event where they were on stage and Simers was interviewing them. And they brought Kershaw back from Arizona to be part of this with Koufax, and they bring him up, and right, he's comparing hand sizes with Koufax and stuff. But that link was established like very, very early in his career before he was that guy, right? This is pre Cy Young Kershaw. Um, and yeah, dealing with that, the expectations, and like Plaschke said, dealing with the failure and just kind of the resilience, I think, more than anything, I think is what we think of. And I think those of us, right, that have gone to be kind of in his orbit, so to speak, I think, as good as he was as a pitcher, we've seen great athletes in across various sports. But I think what really kind of stands out about him is kind of, again, the character, right? And I think when I think of him, kind of more than anything, it's like you almost respect him as much as a man as you do, as a baseball player. I kind of think back to a few years ago, after my kid was playing like a soccer game, right? And they team lost late, and he's kind of doing the typical thing that a 8-year-old, whatever, 9-year-old would do, and blaming this and blaming that and blaming the coach who happened to be me that day because I, took out our best defender and had him. The kid wanted to play up, so I said go up, whatever. So, but he's blaming everybody, right? And kind of afterwards, I was kind of like, hey, you got to take responsibility for these things, right? Last week you said right, the team won because of you. Well, now you're going to blame like the worst player on the team and this and that. And the next day when I was thinking about it, I was kind of driving around the day after, I remember, and it kind of hit me like, oh crap, like I want my kid to be like Kershaw, you know? And I think that that's the biggest compliment I think I could pay Clayton Kershaw is, I think, and I'm guessing I'm not alone. I think anybody that's kind of been around and seen the way he works, and this isn't just about sports, right? Regardless, what the field is, I think, ideally, you would want to raise a kid that would approach their profession the way Kershaw does baseball.
I was thinking about this uh, last night and yesterday, because obviously, like I started working at the Times in 2019. Um, I was not a I was not a baseball junkie beforehand. Obviously, I knew, like, I followed Clayton Kershaw pretty closely. I grew up in Arizona. The Dodgers were in Arizona a lot. He notoriously struggled in Arizona. But the whole, and I think to kind of Plaschke's point, because that to me is what's so interesting about like his legacy, right? Is like the failure part of it, the complexity of his relationship. I think especially with like the fan base, right? And how so much of the frustrations of all of those postseason disappointments got, in a lot of ways, unfairly dropped on his shoulders for reasons that we've talked about before, and that a lot of his teammates brought up yesterday, which is he was pitching on short rest. He was pitching after throwing 250 innings in the regular season. He was coming out of the bullpen. He was taking the ball no matter how he felt. Um, and that's why, like, the longevity of his career and the way it's ending now is like really interesting, because I don't know how many like a lot of athletes can probably be defined by failure and having to overcome postseason obstacles or whatever. Um, the thing that I don't know how often you see are athletes that uh, stay with one team and have as many repeated like gut punch moments as Clayton Kershaw and the Dodgers did, um, and then still have a way where they eventually win, right? And all of the reasons, I mean, that's the irony, right? Like the reasons that he became the postseason scapegoat are all the reasons that people now respect him for, because he was willing to like take the ball in those moments and whatever. And for me, like, so obviously I get here like the second half of 2019. Um, and I remember like that game 5 against the Nationals and just thinking like, oh, like this is what this is like. Have it like and it's a very visceral thing when you're like around the Dodgers and the season ends on a bad Clayton Kershaw outing, right? Like it's for people who haven't been around the team or followed the team really closely, like it's hard to imagine like a more frustrating, like heartbreaking way for seasons to repeatedly end. And that year might have been the worst because it felt like for him and the team, like the window might have been closing in a lot of ways, at least on that era. And I remember in 2020, the closest thing to he pitched game 4 of the NLCS that year. And didn't he pitched okay, had one bad inning, but then they lost and they were down 3-1 to the Braves, and it felt like, man, they're going to lose again. And I remember, I was shout out our former assistant sports editor Mike Heiserman, who sent me to Texas to like find people that know Kershaw or grew up with him or whatever to kind of, since that series was in Texas. So I ended up watching a lot of that game and the inning where it fell apart, like with a bunch of his high school friends. And then you kind of got that perspective through their view, right? And these are guys that had gone to his postseason start every single October. They had felt kind of the sting of it through his, from his perspective a little bit. And it really resonated with me, like how difficult and painful it was for him to deal with these things every single year. And to your point, Dylan, the fact that, you know, that he would endure all those different kind of moments and all those different kind of struggles. And obviously there were times I'm sure Dodger fans probably hated him more than they appreciated him because of that. That the way this is ending now and the way that he kind of continued to exhibit the traits that you mentioned, again, I think kind of speak to the character part of him that so many people have praised over the last couple of years, especially as he's let people in a little bit more, as he's loosened up. And to go out in a season like this and to have the kind of moment he's going to get tonight in front of Dodger fans, like I don't remember being as excited or just as interested to go to the ballpark to experience a scene and a moment with a crowd and a player, and I'm really curious and yeah, like frankly, kind of like I think it's gonna be really cool what it's like at the ballpark tonight because it's all of that background now finally coming through in a moment where the 18 years of such highs and such lows and such frustrations and then ultimately such triumphs are going to get to be shared from the crowd to him. And that's why I wasn't expecting him to announce a retirement like this. Freddie Freeman joked, yeah, he told me a month ago he was going to retire. I didn't know. I thought he would just retire and not tell anybody at the end of the season. So I think it's very cool. And he said his wife Ellen was part of what pushed him into doing this. But I think it's very cool he did it this way. I think it's going to make for a very cool scene tonight. And then obviously it sets up kind of an interesting little subplot to the rest of the season for the Dodgers, which is, win one for Kersh, even though the guys had kind of shot that down and he said he didn't want to think about it that way. But it is another thing to think about as they go into the playoffs.
Yeah, but I don't think tonight is his last start at Dodger Stadium. I think he's going to pitch again here. If the playoffs go as long as we think they are, we'll see him again here.
Well, I mean, they're two bullpen meltdowns away from it being his last start at Dodger Stadium.
I mean, it is fitting that it ends the season, right? Because I do feel like the baton has officially been passed. Those years that, right, when Kershaw had these quote unquote, again, and I was the one that like ripped Plaschke and I just killed him. But those late inning meltdowns.
Yeah, you're the guys who incited the the discord.
I mean, those were seasons, really, when you look at it, right? The team failed him, right? The organization failed him by failing to put good players around him. And now he has officially passed that baton to Shohei Ohtani, who is now being failed by the organization. So he can wave goodbye and live happily in retirement.
I was so uncomfortable. I'll never forget this. After one of those meltdowns, I trashed him repeatedly. It's the day after the season, and I'm down doing the wrap-up stuff. And Kershaw gets on the elevator with me. So I go back up to the press box. Just he and I on the elevator. I'm thinking he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. He's going to strangle me. I'm dead. But he didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. He just looked stone faced. He just took all these years. He just took it.
Yeah.
He took it from me. He took it from others. I mean, he just took it.
That would have been incredible if he had strangled you. It's like this whole thing
Yeah,
is an act. I'm right here. I'm gonna bear my true self and strangle
yeah.
you, Plaschke.
I know. Oh, that's what I was thinking. Saying, how can this guy say nothing when I've just torched him for the third straight time?
One thing I kind of remember is in one of those St. Louis meltdowns. I can't remember which of the 2 years it was, but the series ends in St. Louis, and so he does his scrum afterwards, and the thing was at that point now AJ Ellis, his best friend on the team, is a free agent, you know, and so I kind of circle back to Kershaw after the group has left, and I'm like, hey, I know this isn't like a great time, but I'm just not going to see you again. Um, you want to talk at all about like what Ellis means to this team and stuff because this is going to be kind of your only chance to do this. And again, the guy was completely heartbroken, but he kind of pulled himself together for a few minutes, and talked about how why the team had to re-sign AJ Ellis. So that was kind of like again one of those things too. I think a lot of guys would have just kind of been okay. I just kind of can't deal with it. But whatever it was, he always answered the bell, right? I mean, we think too a couple years ago, to that the NLDS where they got knocked out in Arizona, right? He pitches game one. He already knows at this point that he's gonna need shoulder surgery. His arm's like hanging on by a thread. He goes out there, it's like, hey, they want to give me the ball. They know what kind of condition I'm in. I'm
So
gonna try.
sad.
Yeah. But there's something kind of heroic about that, right? I mean, I think it's interesting too because the Japanese reporters that cover this team have really grown to admire Kershaw, and they talk about how like Japanese he is, in the sense that if you watch any kind of Japanese movie, Japanese comic books, there a lot of times there are not happy endings. It ends in tragedy, right? Because the journey is kind of what matters. The first like kind of popular sports comic book in Japan was about a boxer. The last, the last page, the guy dies on his stool. So
God, Kershaw died
so
on his stool many times.
that's the thing, right? And I think that kind of the way he goes about it, the routine. I mean, he's almost in a lot of ways, And so again, I'm not too surprised, that over the years, he's gotten along, right, and he's been kind of a cultural bridge of sorts too. When Kuroda, right, when he was a rookie, Hiroki Kuroda came over, didn't speak the language like at all. And they kind of communicated basically by playing catch, right? Every day they became catch partners, and I think that kind of helped Kuroda assimilate into the team. I think, obviously, Kershaw and Ohtani, Kershaw and Yamamoto, there's kind of a mutual respect there that's kind of really helped bring these guys in. And I think, again, right, the way he kind of goes about his work resonates to them, right, in right the cultural background that they come from. And obviously he's a guy, I even remember, man, one time there was a year, I don't know if you remember this, Plash. Andy Van Slyke, right? His son, Scott Van Slyke, was on the team. And during the offseason, Van Slyke talks, I don't know, goes drunk on some radio show and talks about how everybody hates Puig, I think including Kershaw. And so early spring training, Kershaw kind of goes out of his way to talk to me about this, that Puig is this and he's been better. And I'll say this, for 1 week, Yasiel Puig was on his best behavior. And I always kind of thought it was that he read those comments and it meant that much to him, that Clayton Kershaw of all people would kind of say nice things about him, that it kind of kept him as long, engaged as long as Puig's attention span would allow him to be engaged.
So, do we think we'll see more of Kershaw now once he retires? Do you think we'll see him back here at all? I say I say no. I say he's gone. He's not an Angelino. He's never really liked it here that much. I don't think he comes back.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. I don't know. It's a little like it's interesting, and it was kind of interesting. Yesterday when he was like talking about his teammates and how much he's enjoyed this year, because it struck me like, okay, well, if you were to look at all of their different rosters Clayton Kershaw has played on, this one probably has the least amount of like really close friends just by the nature of his age and the fact that there's been so much turnover in his time. And, obviously they cut Austin Barnes earlier this year. who was his closest friend on the team. And yeah, I look at I I wonder because I don't like if he does come back, if he is around. I think it's more likely like you see him at maybe CBI, the Camelback Ranch, in spring training for a couple days or something. Like I have a hard time imagining he just checks out from that completely. Maybe he does. He's going to be busy. He's going to have 5 kids by that point. Um, but if he is, it's going to be because of the like just allure of what I think being a Dodger is, right? Because you're right, Plash. Like I think like LA was always kind of an awkward fit for him from like the moment he first got here. But the Dodger thing, he's always had and expressed, especially in the last couple years as he's hit different milestones in franchise history. He's always had such an appreciation for the Dodgers' history and their pitching lineage and what it means to be among the ranks of Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale and Don Sutton and all Fernando Valenzuela and Oral Hershiser and all of the great pitchers that have worn that uniform. And I think that probably in a similar way to how Sandy Koufax is even now still around from time to time as kind of like that, um, just kind of that embodiment in a lot of ways of a certain history of the team. I would expect that from time to time he'll be around, especially if there's another or other great future Dodger pitchers, maybe some that are already currently on the team. I think, it was interesting listening to Yoshinobu Yamamoto last night talk about what Clayton Kershaw has meant and how much he's looked up to him. And I know, like, talking to Kershaw about Yamamoto this year, like the kind of mutual respect that he has for him, and like Clayton Kershaw waxed poetic about what it was like watching Yoshinobu Yamamoto throw a long toss. So that sounds like a guy that I think in some ways will still find a way to be around a backfield at spring training.
Does he get the next statue?
I mean, he's going to get a statue, I would assume. I'm trying to think if there's a next one that would come before him.
Tyler the Sorter's gotta get a statue, doesn't he?
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
going
would
to be
think.
interesting. It's going to be interesting the order that these things happen, right? I mean, obviously the owners are ultimately the ones that sign off on him on the statues. The fact that I mean, they pretty much, right? They gave him the big contract. Right? It happened under Guggenheim. I mean, they saw like a lot of his career. I think they're right. The owners feel very close to him, and they might, right? He might jump the line because of that. Kind of going back though, I do think, I think at some point, I don't know when, and I don't know the arrangement that this would happen. I could see him on the air. I
Oh,
think,
no way. No way
yeah,
he's Carlos Caros. No way.
he's really good. I think he's really good on the air. And the thing is, here's the thing, man. It's like like he really likes baseball. I remember, after the Astros sign stealing thing kind of came out, you know, and the next spring he's kind of in the clubhouse, and right, the sport is obviously the credibility of the sport had kind of taken a hit, and here he was talking about how excited he was for the upcoming season, not just for him and his team, but hey, look, you can watch Mike Trout and you can watch this guy and you can watch that guy, and we have all these great players. And I remember afterwards I kind of talked to him a little bit about this, where the game kind of, right, or whatever, you couldn't blame him for kind of losing faith, so to speak, in baseball, right? He had invested so much into it. He got cheated out of this thing that he'd been chasing, which at this point he still didn't have, right? The World Series. And he kind of talked about, when he was a kid, and the steroid scandal broke out in baseball, right? And he said he kind of felt conflicted at the time, but what eventually kind of like won him over was just like, I just wanted to play, you know? And look, obviously he's not going to be playing anymore, but I do think he's going to want to be around it. I mean, again, every time they mic him up in the middle of the game, I think what really comes across is how much he likes talking about baseball. You stop him anytime, and right, he might not be great about like the personal stuff. He's really good talking about baseball. You get him talking about some really good player on another team. He loves talking about this stuff. And so I think he's going to be around in some capacity. I think he'd be great on the air. Again, I'm not really sure how you arrange something like this, because I do
What do you
think,
criticize? Would he criticize anybody? That's the problem. He wouldn't criticize anybody.
I think he would be a good like studio show. Like if there was a slightly more, I think like if you look at like Fox's like pregame show with like Poppy and Jeter and A-Rod, because he also has he has like a natural like kind of wit about him too that I think I don't know I like I do have a tough time envisioning him like being a every single day color commentator, especially at any time in the near future. But he has a lot of like quick hitting because like Dylan's right. Like when you talk to him about baseball, I mean, he can explain to you uh, in 30 seconds, what more information you might gather from 30 minutes of conversation with everybody else around the ballpark in that day. And he's funny. He's got a personality. He can be, he can kind of give ribs at guys. The great David Vassay asked him yesterday what he expects from tonight. He goes, "I expect to pitch well, Dave." Like that's kind of who he
He's
is.
always giving Dave crap, I haven't liked that. I think he's always been. Sometimes he's been mean spirited to Dave. I haven't liked that.
Well, he would not be alone in that category.
Yeah, Vassay works so hard. He doesn't deserve that.
I also wonder about like the coaching part too at some point. Because that's one of the other things, like being around for this stage of his career. Like he did not like being going out of his way and being a leader, right? Like he was not proactive on that front. But especially as the rest of his rotation mates got younger, and I think this started like from basically everybody after Walker Buehler. So the Dustin Mays, the Tony Gonsolins, the Emmett Sheehan's, you think about all the young pitchers they've had up here, and just the stuff that when they would sit in the dugout with him, when he would explain, here's how you look at the game. Here's why I would throw a first pitch curveball here to steal a strike. Here's why, I would sequence my pitches in this way or attack this part of the plate. And I think that's the kind of stuff that has especially like these last couple of years has made it's why he's so good because he understands pitching at such a level. And I do wonder if there's any part of him that eventually misses that part of being able to because I do think he enjoyed that explaining the game to guys and seeing how
Yeah, but
players
that's hard.
kind of
Being
grow
a
there.
coach, being a coach is hard work. It's long hours. He don't want that again. He's not going to go back and do that.
Well, or a like an advisor of some sort, so in some capacity where he could be around to help players develop. But I think in the near future, he's going to be a dad first and foremost. That was the other thing from yesterday around the ballpark. I got there and he's it's 1:30 and he's in the outfield throwing batting practice to his oldest son Charlie, and then they're playing catch on the field later in the day. And then as my favorite moment of yesterday is the rest of the pitchers are taking pitching fielding practice. I guess Kershaw's early retirement gift is he got PFPs off yesterday, but he's just sitting there in the grass with Charlie watching it. So I think that's going to occupy a lot of his time, at least for the next couple of years.
Well, that's nice. It was a great day and a great send off and a great way to retire. It's he's the greatest Dodger ever. Do you all agree? He's the greatest Dodger ever. The greatest LA Dodger ever.
Yeah, I would think so. I think the way you put it in your column is right. Like it's more longevity than Koufax, more accolades than Fernando,
Yeah.
and represents. I mean, it was just the best run of Dodger baseball in LA history. I think
Yes.
obviously they've won
Yes, it
more World
is.
Series in a short time, but yeah, this is you know he has been the face of it, and it makes him a really singular face. I think in a way that few athletes and any of the teams here reaches.
You know what I felt for you? I felt bad for you yesterday.
Anze Kopitar.
But yes, Kopitar retired and nobody knew it. That's so sad. He's such a great LA. He's the same as Kershaw is to hockey.
Yes.
That's I
Yes.
actually, it's funny because our former colleague Helene Elliott, she has a Substack that you guys can all subscribe to, but she wrote about the two icons leaving. I remember looking at the other guy thinking, who is that guy? So yeah, exactly. To
Oh,
your
so
point.
bad.
Well, he made light of it. He thanked what I assume was the much smaller media contingent at his retirement press conference, saying, thank you with the other big news going on in the day, but was happy to fly under the radar for Clayton Kershaw. All right, well, and in the spirit of Clayton Kershaw, I will do my best to be on time next time, right down to the minute. No wasted moments of my day
It's
and my
unbelievable. You're
routine.
late. You ruined our routine. You screwed up everything. Way to go,
I know
Jack.
you got to show more respect to your elders, man. Kershaw always, shouted out guys like Nick Punto and Skip Schumacher. And look at you, just showing up late whenever you want.